is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom. Yeah.
My name is Zainab Sammaz, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jan Faria, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Yes.
Take one. Well done.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paolini, and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
Ready? Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Talking Tennis stream. Today, we are looking back on the 2024 WTA season, and I am joined by none other than the 22-time Grand Slam champion, Pam Shriver. Thanks for coming on, Pam.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. And I just can't believe another year has been wrapped up on the WTA tour, and we're about to hit 2025. What? It's crazy.
I know, it's crazy. It literally feels like years ago that January happened, but it's crazy, and that's what this show's about. It's all about looking back on all the moments we've had. It feels like there's been a lot that's happened this year on the WTA tour. So I think if we just sort of go back to the start of the year, I mean, we started in January in the Australian Open, and I kind of want to ask you questions on each of the, I suppose, the top players and players who've had breakout years. And Iga Swiatek is always a player to talk about. She's had a lot gone on this year. The Australian Open obviously wasn't her best moment, losing in the third round, I believe. But then she went on to have a huge streak, when Doha. She won Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros. I mean, when you think about Roland Garros, so fourth Roland Garros, I think third in a row. How, like, is it a case of Iga Swiatek kind of being looking towards a Rafael Nadal kind of streak, or is that too big a claim right now, or is she always going to be the favorite?
Yeah, I think that looking at Rafa's numbers, I think that's tough to pin on anybody, even if you're as young as Iga is and already won 4 Roland Garroses. I think Chrissy's number is probably more realistic, that Iga might have the expectation that she can, when she retires from the sport, that she'll have more Roland Garroses than any other female player in history. But I'd be stunned if she gets to close to 14. I actually feel there's some players that are maturing right now that feel pretty comfortable on clay. The number 1 Chinese player, Qinwen Zheng, is an example, and I think there's some other ones that I think Sabalenka's only going to get better on clay as well. And they had one of the best matches. I know it was a different court than Roland Garros, but the finals of Madrid was right up there as the best match of the year. So I think Iga's going to have much tougher time getting the next 4 than she has the first 4.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we talk about her streak at Roland Garros, but the Olympics was also held at Roland Garros, and that is where you, like you said, Zheng beat Swiatek. So Zheng has shown that she can do it in that arena, on the surface. And who's to say that she won't do it again next year, maybe at Roland Garros, especially after having such a strong end to the year.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, that result, when you think about the Olympics, sort of like how in 2012, the Olympics went back to Wimbledon within a month of Wimbledon. And, for Qinwen Zheng to have that win over Iga on red clay at the Olympics, even though I know end of July, early August, the conditions are much faster in Paris because you're dead in the middle of the summer, versus like this year, especially during actual Roland Garros, late May, early June. The weather was brutal. It rained a ton. It was cold. So it was playing a lot more heavy, which would have hurt, some of the big clay power players. But I think it'll be interesting. I think the aura of Iga is not what it was, but it's certainly interesting. One of the themes of the season was all the late coaching changes, and to see what Wim Fissette has in mind as he tackles a full year 2025 with Iga with so much talent. And the thing that I'm most concerned about Iga is really how much anxiety she carries for someone who's lived at number 1 so long, won multiple majors, she just seems to get way too anxious on the court. And we'll see whether or not she can get that to be lowered in the coming time.
Yeah, and that anxiety seems to be a big feature at the Olympics, the weight of her nation on her shoulders and being the huge favorite. Do you think that was the big factor in her not taking the title, or do you think it was Zheng's performance as well?
Well, I think that while Iga maybe didn't voice until maybe a month or two later how difficult the schedule is when you're a top player during an Olympic year, but I think she was starting to feel the effects of the year where she had been number one since Iga had taken the number one ranking back from Sabalenka for late in the season 2023. Obviously, Sabalenka would gain it back in I think it was September, but Iga was starting to hit the wall and have kind of a mini version of burnout, it seems like, and she kept sort of going back to that feeling that it was just too much to have that what really is a fifth major in a year, and really, four of those five majors, Roland Garros in late May through Wimbledon, the Olympics, and U.S. Open, really come at such a very rapid pace. It's not a very balanced year. And obviously, it's something that the sport has to live with. But I do think by the next Olympic cycle, which is in the Olympic Games will be in LA, where I've been living the last 25 plus years, I hope that like the ITF and the WTA and the ATP can come up with some accommodations for players in an Olympic year to have a little less tennis, like maybe not the Davis Cup and the Billie Jean King Cup in the Olympic year. Just figure out how to have a competition within the Olympic Games that also awards that important ITF property. But it's not fair to the players, given the travel, the demands of the game, the modern game, to expect them to have a regular full schedule plus an Olympic Games every 4 years.
Yeah, and I think the schedule has been a big topic of conversation, both on the WTA and the ATP Tour. And I think that Olympic schedule was even more highlighted this year, given that it was from grass to clay to hard. It felt like a bigger deal, and a lot, perhaps more players this year decided not to go to Paris for the Olympics.
Yeah, that was some interesting decisions. I know there were certainly quite a few Americans because, of course, right after the Olympic Games, everything turns to the lead up to the U.S. Open, the last major of the year, which carries so much importance, especially for the American players. So people like Tiafoe and Korda, Ben Shelton, they bowed out. And was Pegula injured, may have been injured, but anyway, so the US team was certainly compromised, and some other players decided, Sinner wasn't 100%. We didn't yet know what he was carrying as far as the doping positive tests that he found out about in April, and he'd been carrying with that for months, but he wasn't in the best of health, even though he had a tremendous year. So yeah, the Olympics had a bit of a compromised field, but I thought the storylines, and obviously being on Donna Vekic's team, it was especially memorable to see, knowing that it was one of Donna Vekic's goals of the year to win an Olympic medal for Croatia, that she was able to do it and play for the gold medal, ended up silver. But the run and some of the matches, the storylines with Murray and with Rafa, I thought the stories and Djokovic winning. So I thought this Olympic Games was pretty special as far as the tennis goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touch on Vekic there, someone you've worked with a lot for over the past 2 years. I mean, obviously she had a great run at Wimbledon and then went on to win that silver medal. It's been a pretty strong year from your player, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been tremendous to see, Donna join the tour kind of like I did as a middle teenager. It was a very promising teen. I didn't know her that well back in those days, but the fact that she's had her best season ever in 2024 and really looks to go keep that momentum going in 2025 is great. And I think when Donna kind of looks at Jasmine Paolini as an example, somebody who never gotten past the second round of a major, and all of a sudden had this year that was unbelievable, getting to two major finals, winning the Olympic gold in doubles, and Paolini's 28. Krejcikova, I believe, when she won her second major at Wimbledon this year, also 28. So 28, you have so much experience. You know how to manage yourself and the emotions. And I think the thing I was proudest for Donna was to recover. There's Paolini right there, and the excitement that I think that may have been game, set, match for Paolini against Donna. But then to see how Donna reset and got herself together to play such a great Olympic Games was terrific.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a huge recovery, not only physically but also mentally to go and achieve that. And obviously, it was disappointing the way that tournament finished for Donna Vekic. But how do you and how does she look back on that? 6 months down the line.
I'm sorry. How does Donna look back at it?
Well, yeah, Donna and yourself. Do you look back on it with pride?
Yeah, a lot of pride. I think, it's really important for a player who has their sights set on really big goals to taste it, to really feel what it means to contend to win a major. But prior to Wimbledon this past year, Donna had been to a couple of major quarterfinals. But when she had this run this year and got all the way to the semis and then came within 2 points, leading 8-7 in the match tiebreak, 2 points from a Wimbledon final, she could see it. She tasted it. She had the shattering disappointment of not coming through. She knew that physically, towards the end of that, what many people are saying was the best semifinal in the history of Wimbledon on the women's side, and one of the best major semifinals ever. That she just came up short a little bit physically and mentally. So, but these are things that you can continue to work on when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, especially with all the great examples of how many champions have still been able to have their best results into their 30s.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, that semi-final match was phenomenal, and it's featuring in our top 5 WTA matches of the year. It has to. There's no way it couldn't be up there. And just going back a little bit to Iga Swiatek, we spoke about how good her first half of the season was, and then we touched on the Olympics, and the second half of the whole definitely was not up to her usual standards. We've now obviously since learned about the doping case that's been going on. We've obviously learned that she's split with her coach, her long-term coach, and now is working with Wim Vasset. Do you think all of this, we've spoken about how much anxiety she struggles with. Do you think it's all just got too much for her on the court?
Yeah, there's usually what I've experienced since I started to play in 78. Somebody grows more comfortable with the number one ranking the longer they have it. I actually have found, which is a bit of a concern for Iga, that she's been carrying a little bit more anxiety with each and every stage as she was the number one player in the world. Now, obviously, no longer with Sabalenka there. I think it's something she needs to look at, to be honest. And this is somebody who's been traveling with their own mindset coach, sports psychologist. But in my mind, there's something not quite right with that. But these are very things that go deep into a team where maybe I can observe certain things as a commentator or as somebody who's trying to pick up anything I can pick up to help Donna and just kind of think, and maybe Wim Vasset can figure it out. But I think, you've always got to look at your team and make sure they're working, in lockstep together. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Iga in 2025. And is she going to continue to grow with her level of anxiety, or whether or not she's going to be able to figure out how to put it in just a slightly better perspective?
Yeah, and obviously now she is not the world number one, she's the world number two. And do you think that will benefit her going into next year? Or do you think now that there's been this whole new situation with, the doping and she's had that month suspension, do you think that takes a whole new role, or do you think that she can put that behind her?
Well, remains to be seen, right? The news has just been 10 days long.
Yeah.
So it's just quite crazy that one of maybe the biggest off-court storyline is the center positive test and followed up by Iga, both whom held the number one ranking more than anybody else this year. I think I think Iga's situation is going to maybe lead to some changes in the system because, with this ability to find minuscule amounts of substances that are banned and to realize how many supplements these athletes are taking to try and fend off the stress of the physicality, the time changes, the issues you can have with sleep, with injuries, and you can be as careful as possible, but it's kind of like a kid who has a peanut allergy and you try and ask at every restaurant or every place, like, is this food we're ordering have any mix in with any kind of nuts? And they say no, it hasn't. The next thing you know, your kid is like struggling to breathe because there was a contamination, right? And something wasn't cleaned properly or whatever. And I think this is a real problem. I mean, we need to have the cleanest sport possible, and we need to have the anti-doping stay ahead of the cheaters. But there's something that needs to be tweaked right now, because if you have such a small amount that it can't possibly really help you, then I don't know. But I'm all for keeping this sport. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I think we all become, amateur experts because we care about the sport. But unless you really understand chemistry, science, what the whole world is about doping and anti-doping, it's really hard to come down with certainty. But it's just an inkling I have that there needs to be some tweaks.
Yeah, it does feel like doping has become a more, I suppose, big conversation this year than perhaps many would have wanted to. But also, like you say, it's probably good that this conversation does happen, so maybe changes are made so this doesn't happen in the future. But yeah, it's a tricky situation. It's kind of something we can't really know in terms of Swiatek until next year. But as much as maybe a lot of people are looking at Swiatek's second half of the season, it's still been a pretty successful season for her. 5 titles, more titles than anyone else this season. 4 of those 1,000 level and 1 at Roland Garros, as she's done so many years. So it's definitely not a poor season by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I'm just looking at her tournaments as well. I mean, I think her year up till Roland Garros was 1 year, and then kind of the way things went the rest of the year, not that great. I'm trying to think if she won a tournament after. I know she won the bronze, so she won the last match, but she didn't win a tournament after Roland Garros, unless I'm missing something. And that's a little bit unusual. But I think if we remember back to the year when Barty retired and Swiatek took over the number 1, she went on that crazy long win streak. So it seems like Iga comes out and is a better first half player the last few years. And, maybe that's tinkering with a few things schedule wise, or again, figuring out how to live better with the stress of being a top player, and in most of the last 3.5 years, the number 1 player. But look, I think it's shaping up to be really quite fun in 2025. I know we're still reviewing 2024, but you kind of think about the rise of Sabalenka and how consistent Sabalenka's become, and the signs that Gauff showed after having the coaching change, and how she bounced back after the US Open. And I think Gauff is going to have a really strong 2025. I think Iga is going to be a contender, obviously, and Rybakina teamed up with Goran. All these players have won at least 1 major, and I think those 4 are going to be really interesting top 4 to look at, and then a whole bunch of really experienced chasers like Qinwen Zhang, and I want to see what Paolini does, her first big year after all her results. And I think we're always going to have some surprises. Emma Navarro, like, is she gonna fill her gas tank up again, because it ran empty given everything she did to get to number 8 in the world. Krejcikova, Danielle Collins was one of the stories of 2024 when she won back-to-back Miami and Charleston, and she's now decided not to retire. So I just look down, and there's just storylines with everyone in that top 25.
Yeah, and obviously the person that has taken over from Swiatek, and we've mentioned a little bit, was Sabalenka. just in the latter half of this year, and she actually began the season defending her Australian Open title in quite dominant fashion. Really, I don't know how you look back at that, but it just always seemed like Sabalenka was going to be the one to take that title.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. She didn't drop a set. And then the rematch with Coco Gauff, Coco had chances in both those sets. But Sabalenka, it's very, very interesting. I was thinking about this and when I was thinking about doing this review show, and the player that Sabalenka reminds me most of in the history of women's tennis is Navratilova. And I'll tell you why, because both Navratilova and Sabalenka physically so gifted, extremely strong power. They did it different ways. Martina, obviously a lefty, used powerful forehand and was always trying to put pressure onto the net. But emotionally, I really look at them as kindred spirits, because Martina needed to mature into her talent, into her power, and learn how to really be a disciplined champion. And I feel like Sabalenka in the last couple of years has become that disciplined champion. And both like to have, a lot of laughs, yet they like to train hard. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if Sabalenka doesn't come out this year feeling, unlike Swiatek was sort of carrying more and more stress as she has number one. I want to see how Sabalenka does, having finished number one in the rankings for the first time year end, and starting the year at number one, and on going back trying to three-peat. So I think she's going to have a big year as well.
Yeah, I mean that's high praise to compare to someone like Navratilova, and it'd be interesting to see if Sabalenka can get anywhere near her achievements. But yeah, I can definitely see the comparisons that you've made. She actually did not win another title until I believe Cincinnati, because she reached the quarterfinals of Roland Garros where she had stomach problems and then had to miss Wimbledon due to a shoulder injury, and then skip the Olympics. But yeah, it's interesting that she wasn't really a factor in terms of titles until Cincinnati. Obviously had that fantastic final in Madrid that again is another one of our matches of the year. But yeah, Cincinnati was where it all kind of kickstarted into gear again.
Yeah, because one thing by missing the Olympics is that Sabalenka, after she recovered from the shoulder problem, she did enter DC, which was kind of like what a lot of the Americans decided to do, or some of the Americans, to start the hard court season lead up to the Open with DC. And I think that helped Sabalenka get match tough again, get confidence in that her shoulder was healthy enough, even though she didn't do great in DC. Well, semifinals, lost to Buskova, and then lost in the quarterfinals to Anna Samova in the Rogers Cup. Before you do what you know what your dream is to be able to peak for majors. So then what Sabalenka did was start to peak for this great run by winning Cincinnati and then playing a great US Open, where, probably the most awkward part of the tournament besides the finals was actually a great straight set win over Pegula, but was that late start at night with Alexandrova in the round of 16, and Sabalenka lost the first set 2-6, and then what did she do? She lost 3 more games. So that's again showing kind of like the mental strength of dealing with like an 11:30 start and being in the end being able to run away with just losing 3 games in the last 2 sets. So the mental strength is really starting to match the physical strength for Sabalenka.
Yeah, and I feel like the US Open was quite a big deal for Sabalenka. Obviously, she'd already won the Australian Open, so defending it was always the aim. But with the US Open, she had a few demons. She had a few semi-final demons. She had the final last year with Coco Gauff, and I think that was a big deal for her to finally take that off her list.
Yeah, I mean, look who she beat her last 2 matches at the Open. It was Emma Navarro, USA, and you mentioned that really, which was, I think, a traumatic loss. Sabalenka last year in the finals US Open, when she won the first set over Coco Gauff, and then the crowd plus Coco Gauff's mental toughness just wore her out emotionally, and she kind of withered under the noise. But I'll tell you what, the stadium, maybe it wasn't quite as noisy when Navarro made that good comeback in the second set to take it to a tiebreak, and then the crowd was so for both Navarro and Pegula in that final. But look how Sabalenka learned from last year's loss to Gauff to beat two Americans in the semis and the finals to take her first U.S. Open. It was pretty cool to see from her standpoint.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously the ranking points say that she's world number one, but for you, on balance, does she feel like you're world number one at the moment?
100%. Yeah. I mean, look, we get it, right? In the game sometimes someone can get to number one without having, maybe feeling like they had the best season but in this case, yes, she's number one both in the rankings when you see it tangibly, but also intangibly when you think about the year and who had the best year. It's Sabalenka.
Yeah, and obviously we've been treated to a couple of finals this year between her and Swiatek, but I suppose the thing that we really want is a Grand Slam final between them two.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few finals that I could look forward to. Well, first off, anyone involving Vekic would be just
Well, of
fine with
course, yeah.
me. But when you think about some of the history, like let's say Sabalenka and Coco Gauff played in a finals of a major again, that would be pretty cool. When you think, as you mentioned, that match, Iga against Sabalenka in a final, I want to see a rematch of one of the best major finals in the last 10 years, which was Rybakina and Sabalenka 2 years ago at the Australian Open. It's one of the best power matchups in a major final, quality wise, that I'd seen. So I feel like there were so many memorable matches this year, both at the tour level and at the major level, and some memorable ones at the Olympics. I feel like we've got some rivals, right? We've got some rivalries that have been brewing for the last couple of years. I think we're going to see some good ones, great matchups between recent matchups that have been memorable. Can't wait.
Yeah, it looks set to be a great year ahead. And I think a lot of the talk as well, just looking ahead, I suppose, is obviously Sabalenka has won the Australian Open and the US Open. Iga has won Roland Garros and the US Open. And there's a lot of conversation about who could perhaps do the career Grand Slam first. And in your mind, who do you think is more likely out of those two?
Well, I actually feel now, if you'd asked me that a year ago, I would have said probably Swiatek, but I think now, I think Sabalenka. Obviously, she's got the game for Wimbledon. You mentioned that her shoulder was bad, so couldn't play Wimbledon this year, which was to Donna Vekic's benefit. Donna was due to play her second round if Sabalenka had played and was healthy enough, and she wasn't. But I think Sabalenka, I think her game matches up great on grass. And then it's clay, and it's whether or not she can do the double. I feel like physically she's certainly strong enough. She's played some great matches Sabalenka has on clay the last few years. And I feel like trending in the right direction, whereas Iga, I am questioning which direction she's trending.
Yeah, that's interesting. And kind of going to another one of those big, the four that you mentioned are the standouts for the next season. Coco Gauff has had an interesting season herself. I mean, started with a title in Auckland, defending her title in Auckland, and then there was deep runs in Australian Open and Roland Garros, but then some mixed results, not the best North American hardcourt swing. And then there seemed to be a switch after parting ways with Brad Gilbert and going to Matt Daly. And what do you think is the big switch? Was it mentally, physically, or just a part of her game that changed? What was it for you that stood out and go with Daly?
Yeah, well, when I think about some of the matches that Coco played in the middle of the year, talk about, I know we've mentioned the stress that Iga wore pretty clearly. Boy, Coco Gauff had some big meltdowns in the middle of matches. The one at Wimbledon against Emma Navarro, the one against Donna Vekic actually at the Olympic Games over a line call that when you listen to, it was a judgment by the umpire. Coco was just getting way too upset and then kind of lost her way with her second serve. The forehand wasn't as much of a liability during the summer as I think the second serve, but the forehand was still a struggle. And then whatever happened, getting away from the shores of the US after the US Open, not having the burden of trying to defend her US Open from 2023. Going down to China, we're nowhere near the same amount of focus and attention. And boy, did Coco Gauff finish the year great. You mentioned Matt Daly coming onto the team. I flew down to join Donna in Wuhan, and I had a really nice conversation with Matt Daly, who has a very calm way about him and also very knowledgeable way. And I think that was just what Coco Gauff needed at this point in her career. And she's got a great team around her. And I think while she picked up a lot of good stuff from Brad Gilbert, and Brad, helped catch Coco Gauff on fire in the summer of 2023, it had obviously run its course. Unless sometimes coaching partnerships are short term, sometimes they're midterm, and sometimes they can be long term. And I think that was one that Coco will always look back. Brad was very pivotal, helped her win her first major, which is always the most important major. But now it was time to move on.
Yeah. So do you think Matt Daly could be more of a long-term situation for Gauff?
I think so. I think so. Although in this day and age, it's really hard to have these coach. When I say long term, I'm talking 4 to 5 years. I think it's unusual to say have the Musetti type situation or Alcaraz with Juan Carlos Ferrero, where your primary coach in your early years on the tour is the same one you've had since your teenage years. That's pretty unusual. But I think it's really good to have continuity. Look at like Michael Russell, what he's done on the men's side, and Paul Annacone in tandem with Taylor Fritz. And Taylor keeps having better and better years. And I think a lot of that is because the continuity of the teams. So, yeah, I think Matt Daly's going to wear well.
Yeah, I mean, she finished her season, had a great time in China, and then also went to the WTA finals in Riyadh and won the title there, her biggest title since the US Open, and fought back against Zhang, who was really probably the informed player, and lifted that trophy and has got a lot of momentum going into next season.
Yeah, she sure does. I mean, look, and this is when Matt Daly, it's great that he came on for Coco to see kind of the last few tournaments of her year. Obviously, she played well, but to be able to have this preseason time to really decide whether you're going to tinker a tiny bit, maybe with a forehand grip, just a tiny bit, or you're going to do something with a serve where maybe you decide to bring the toss further behind you, maybe slightly more to the left, so you well and truly develop more of a reliable kick second serve. Coco, there's no better athlete on the tour. It seemed like for a little bit, Coco got set in her ways about how she was going to hit her forehand and how she was hitting her second serve, and it wasn't serving her well. But I feel like she's more open, and this is the time of year where you can really work on some of those tweaks.
Yeah, I'm just looking down the rankings to focus on the next player, and honestly, I think everyone would have been surprised had I said the next number 4 would be Jasmine Paolini at the start of the year. I mean, in Australia, she reached the 4th round of the Australian Open, and that was her best Grand Slam result at the time, and it feels like insignificant at this point. I mean, did you have any idea at the start of this year that Paolini could achieve anything close to what she's achieved?
Well, not really. I guess when you look back to the end of 2023, I'm just looking now at her rankings or her results, and she actually won quite a few matches. She lost the finals of Tunisia. She did pretty well getting the semis of Zhengzhou towards the end of 2023. These are kind of low profile, got the round of 16 of China Open, losing a tough one to Sabalenka. So again, this is going back 14 months ago. She actually showed a lot of really good signs by winning more matches than she had before. So she did have momentum going into 2024, but I think it was really the win in Dubai where she went through Hadash, Maya, Leylah Fernandez, Sakkari, Rybakina, Kirstea, and Kalinskaya. I mean, especially the beginning. Actually, the Rybakina one was one of the many walkovers that Rybakina had to issue. But that was really the tournament, a WTA 1000, where Paolini, you just make leaps. When you can win a WTA 1000 in a tough field, it just makes you grow. And I think coupled with her last couple of tournaments of 2023, maybe the signs were there. Now, the hard part is, can you do it back-to-back years? So we'll see.
Yeah, I suppose hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I think a lot of people thought when she won Dubai that that might be the peak of her year, but it's been nothing of the sort really. She's gone on to achieve 2 Grand Slam singles finals, a Grand Slam doubles final, won the Olympic doubles gold with Sara Errani, and won the Billie Jean King Cup finals. It's kind of an incredible season for Paolini.
And Matt, she does it with that smile on her face. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously she's going to have a smile. There she is sitting with the Dubai trophy after winning it. But she's really, Paolini seems to have quite a balanced approach to winning and losing. I mean, she kind of like works hard. She has really good energy that crowds all over the world really are, it's appealing because she just kind of has this aura and this energy and this, she's willing to smile whether she messes the point up. And I don't know if this is like a stereotype for female athletes, like fans will gravitate when a female is just has smile and kind of like happy and bouncing around, but it's kind of like the version of Carlos Alcaraz on the men's side. I mean, part of his popularity is, not only the sensational quality of his shot, about that.
Yeah, and obviously we said that she reached two Grand Slam singles finals. The Roland Garros final was very comfortable for Iga Swiatek, but the Wimbledon final was very, very close with Barbora Krejcikova. Do you think there'll be any regrets, or do you think she'll just think?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure, regrets on the Wimbledon final. She also winning the first set 2-6 or 6-2 for Paolini, and given all the matches she played, big time matches, but maybe the Vekic match that was almost 3 hours, maybe that semifinal played in late in that final, which was pretty solid 3-set effort after the 7-6 in the third win in the semis. So maybe finally ran out a little bit of gas. But look, she had one of the biggest breaks of the whole tournament. Paolini did in the round of 16. Madison Keys had her, right? It was way up in the third, and then Keys suffered. There were a lot of people that had injuries at Wimbledon, but had that leg and just couldn't even finish the match. And I think Keys around the 16 on grass, I think Madison would have won that match had she not gotten injured. And look how Paolini took advantage. Played actually that quarterfinal win over Navarro, 6-2, 6-1. I scouted that because Donna had already gotten through, had won her quarterfinal earlier. And oh my gosh, Paolini made like 4 unforced errors. Navarro was absolutely outmatched, which hardly happened last year. And so we went into that semi thinking, uh-oh, but it's a matchup. I knew Donna would have a better matchup, have a pretty good chance, and she did. But Paolini, that was just an amazing run for her when you consider she just got into her first major final, losing to Iga at Roland Garros.
Yeah, and we've spoken about how much Paolini, having the year she's had, has been a surprise, but also Krejcikova winning Wimbledon came as a huge surprise to many, just like Von Druscha winning it last year was a big surprise. I'm assuming, I mean, you may have had an inkling that this could be on the cards, but did you have any inkling that this would be on the card?
No. I mean, Krejcikova had very little evidence that the only thing was that she had won a major before. And when you have won a major before, that means if you give yourself the chance and you're playing well enough and the draw happens to play out the way it's going to play out, you tend to believe that you can win another one. It's the first one that gets pretty difficult. But even when you think about Krejcikova, her first round match at Wimbledon, played Kudermetova, Veronika Kudermetova. Get this score: 7-6, 6-7, 7-5. And then her next win over Volley next was 7-6, 7-6. So there was nothing in the first two rounds that would have broadcast that Krejcikova was ready to win her second major. But then by the time, she beats Collins in straight sets, Ostapenko, always a tough out on grass in straight sets, and then Rybakina in the semis. That's when you realize, wow, this might be her chance to win Wimbledon. And also, I think it does help to know that the Czechs, what are they calling it now? Czechia, has such an unbelievable history, especially in the women's game, of winning Wimbledon. So she carried that and had the belief.
Yeah, and that's 2 years in a row for Czechia, and it almost feels like Wimbledon is becoming the most open of the slams on the women's side now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and if you think about the position Donna put herself in this year, a player who for her whole career has been comfortable on grass. It could have been Vekic's tournament. If you had said 5 years ago that Vondrousova and Krejcikova would win back-to-back Wimbledons, you just would have shook your head and said, "No, I'm sorry, you got that wrong." So, and we'll see whether, and even Rybakina, when she won it in that year, she was a bit of a surprise as well. So you're right, it has become the wild card.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rybakina was a factor in the Wimbledon this year, one of the tournaments in the first half of the year where she was a big factor, and I think many thought she would go on and win the title. It's been a strange year for Rybakina. The start of the year was pretty good. She won three 500 titles, reached the quarterfinals of Wimbledon, and then it's been a less enjoyable second half to the season. She's split from her coach. She's had a lot of illness and injuries. Not played many tournaments, but she did actually come back for the WTA finals. But how do you view Rybakina's year?
Well, a bit of a mystery and a bit of a lost year, I would say, especially when you think about, one of the most dominant matches of the year was the final of Brisbane when Rybakina beat Sabalenka 6-0, 6-3. I mean, basically took the racket out of Sabalenka's hands, and who does that on a hard court? But then it was kind of like she played Adelaide, lost to Alexandrova. I think that tiebreak, losing to Blinkova, what was it, 2018 in the tiebreak, something like that. I think that kind of messed up the start of her year. That was like a real shocker. And then eventually you just had so many situations where she wasn't healthy enough. It started in Dubai, walk over to Paolini, giving Paolini a free pass to the semis. Obviously did well. Danielle Collins was too good in Miami, but there was just too many times where the health was a concern. I'll tell you, one of the best tournaments of the year was Madrid, and when you think Sabalenka beats Rybakina in the semis 7-6 in the third before losing that unbelievable match to Swiatek. But yeah, Rybakina, there was obviously something going on with her health, and I think probably carried a lot of stress, knowing that while she had a lot of feelings that her longtime coach was the one to stick with, and it's always hard to figure out how to get out of a long-term relationship, and the coaching side, especially if it's been seen as contentious at times, which certainly their energy from the box to each other was at times a challenge. I expect big things, and I think it's fascinating to imagine what Goran Ivanisevic, after all the years that he's coached on the ATP Tour, and knowing how he believes in the serve as a big weapon, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they partner. I can't wait to see Rybakina's year in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rybakina and Ivanisevic would be a pretty dream pair for most people, but also I think a lot of people are viewing it as almost a fresh start for Rybakina, kind of moving on from her previous long-term coach.
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing is to kind of sever it, which she did right before the US Open, which kind of makes you realize that things weren't going great at all because you don't make a coaching change like at a major or the week before a major unless things have gone so off the rails. And then, there's a lot of concern and question and mystery around how she was, where she was. And then I liked that she showed up and she was able to take her place in the WTA Tour Finals. I thought she acquitted herself fairly well. I'm sure Goran, why he wasn't there, I'm sure he watched those matches. I think that was important, knowing that he was going to be her coach and they're doing their preseason together now. So let's see. To me, she has the best serve in the women's game since Serena retired. And let's see what Goran does with that big weapon.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the focus on the year as a whole, a breakout year, has been about Jasmine Paolini, but that has kind of overshadowed the likes of Emma Navarro and Diana Schneider. How much do you take of their years? Because there hasn't been so much conversation about them because Paolini has just taken so many of the headlines.
Yeah, I thought there were a lot of great breakout stories. To me, Diana Schneider was almost like almost a newcomer of the year. I mean, sure, she'd been around a little bit, but she's still really young. But I was pretty impressed, especially when you think that she always looks like she has so many little injuries. She's got more support tape, excuse me, on her than any other player. But she knows how to win. And I think Igor, I think his name, the Russian coach, is Igor Andreev. I think he's done a great job with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Schneider.
Excuse me, you're going to have to edit that one out. Yeah, I just got a cough.
Yeah, it's that Schneider has had such a good year. And I think the scary part for many people is that she's won a title on every single surface this year. So it's not like she's a one-trick pony by any means.
No, definitely not a one-trick pony. And let's face it, lefties have a big advantage. And I'm just trying to think, there's been times in the women's game where you get a whole bunch of lefties towards the top. But currently, Diana Schneider's the only lefty in the top 20, which is really unusual. But I think that gives her a big advantage, even more of an advantage, because I mean, I know Leylah Fernandez is, a solid lefty, but there really aren't that many at the top of the game. Leylah Fernandez is at 31. Vondrousova's hanging in there at 39, but she's had a lot of injuries. Lulu Sun, you have a couple back-to-back. But in other times, I remember at one point, I think there were 4 lefties in the top 10 in the world. But right now, so that gives Schneider a big advantage. And Emma Navarro, just seeing her progression. Donna played her a couple of years ago in Monterey when Donna went on to win the title and played Emma Navarro in the second round. When Emma, we didn't know it at the time, was just starting to make her rise up the rankings. And my, did she become a tough out. Combination of mental toughness, her forehand's gotten so much better. Her backhand is one of the best. And she is a great athlete with a wonderful coach. I think a lot of Peter Ayres as a coach. And obviously she has the backing of, she knows that financially, even if she didn't do well, her family's been so successful. So you take that stress out and you work hard and you have a good team around you. Look what can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that Diana Schneider is probably the newcomer of the year. There was also a bit of, a lot of talk about Danielle Collins, who was set to retire towards the end of this year, but has since made the decision to continue for varying reasons. I mean, Danielle Collins was a big story in the first half of this year, winning her home 1000 tournament in Miami, then going on to continue into Charleston. And it didn't necessarily carry on in the second half of the season. There was a few injury problems, I think. But, Danielle Collins has shown that when she's on form, she's definitely a top 10 player.
Well, and you think the start of the year at the Australian Open, it was actually Collins in the second round that should have taken Iga out. Yeah. Iga would end up going out in the next round to Noskova, but Collins, especially on a hard court, is a tough out. But I think that was the most impressive back-to-back titles of the year. To win Miami in your home state, first time ever at WTA 1000. to do it the way she did it against quality opponents. And then like 2 days later, she's in Charleston on the surface change, winning on green clay. So that was really impressive. All along, playing with the fact that she had said that she was going to retire, that 2024 would be her last year. And then she kind of realized, okay, obviously finances are, what are you going to do where you're going to be able to secure this much dough than being a, say top 15 tennis player. She's a great story. So she decided to, flip and still continue to play. It seems like she had some satisfaction with her personal situation and that it wasn't imminent that she needed to start a family in the next year or two. So these are all tough personal decisions that she's given us a bit of a glimpse in, but I think it's fun to have her in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think this form will continue on into 2025? Obviously the second half of the season wasn't there, but do you think it could reignite?
Yeah. I see Collins as one of these players, and maybe Donna's in that same category, when these big, flat, heavy hitters hit their stride, they can beat anybody, but confidence can be fleeting at times. And also she's obviously had some health issues. It's hard to predict, but I do think at some point, during the year, she's going to go on one of those Danielle Collins hot streaks, and look out, because talk about a backhand that can just hurt you from any part of the court. And really it ends up being, for Collins, how does her forehand hold up, and how does the second serve hold up? And if those two sides are solid, then she is one tough out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already mentioned the four players that you believe are likely to be the biggest contenders in 2025. Is there anyone else, any dark horses that you'd like to add to that mix? Anyone we've not spoken about?
I'll throw in a couple of dark horses. I think it's going to be interesting to see Anna Samova's year with her ball striking. If she can stay healthy and be motivated, I think she can just be like a Lindsay Davenport type player, which is speaking high praise. I want to see, let's see, younger players like Noskova of Czechia. Muhova, can she stay healthy for an entire year? Actually, back to back at 21 and 22 in the world, Muhova and Madison Keys, they've just struggled keeping their health. And especially Muhova, like how will she do if she could actually play a full year? She could be somebody that could contend to win a major. Young players like Kostyuk and Kalinskaya, both also with female coaches. I think Badoza, one of the comeback players of the year, someone who's been 2 in the world. So when you go down the rankings, it's like, wow, there's just a lot of depth, which is what you get when you have the leading sport for women in the world for professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's even only just scratching the surface, really, because that's one of our chat also mentioned, Mira Andreeva, still a teenager and still, up and coming. But yeah, there's a lot of depth on the WTA tour. And just to kind of, ask you for next year, are you still going to be working with Donna Vekic? Is that in the plans?
Yeah, I'm still on her team. She's just hired a full-time coach. One of the things Donna had done in the 2 years I was with her is she sort of had 3 different coaches, because nobody could go full-time, and maybe she didn't want someone full-time. So I plugged into some of the US circuits, and then I was always at majors, at 3 of the 4 majors for broadcasting, and ESPN's been really good about letting me do both roles. And I'm still going to be on her team, but I'm going to dial back some of the coaching because she's just hired Sasha Bijan, who's got such great experience, and he doesn't have kids, and he's able to commit to the whole season. So I'm helping with the transition during this off season that Donna's training in LA. I'll be down in Australia to kind of again. And we'll just see. My kids, while they're older, they're still demanding a lot of my time. I've got a lot of family time I need to devote in the coming time, and that's my priority. But I've really enjoyed helping Donna, and I see no reason why she can't have her best year yet, even better than 2024 and 2025.
Yeah, it's a big statement of intent, and to really show hunger to kind of push on from what's already been a pretty good year.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just want to say something about this new coaching partnership that's just forming. Is Sasha, as we know, he started off in this game as Serena's hitting partner for about 10 years. And the quality of his play, he's now 40, so he's a pretty mature adult now. But he can really hit the ball beautifully. And I think to have a coach that can not only watch with a keen eye, but can also feel the pace of the ball and feel how a power player like Donna can push even someone like Sasha back is important for a coach. Like I can see it with my eyes, but I'm on the sideline watching versus like out there on the court and really feeling what it's like. So I think it's an interesting um, combination to have the keen eye of a great tennis brain, but also quite a good player still. So I'm interested to see how they team up for the year.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think there's a lot of new coaching partnerships that everyone's looking out for on both the WTA and ATP side. So it's set to be a very exciting Australian Open season and just 2025 in general. But Pam, thank you so much for your time. You've been really insightful, and it's been really good to chat with you.
Well, thanks. And I know I had a couple of things I needed to pause with. I forgot we were on live on YouTube. I was thinking it was just being recorded as a pod, but thanks for inviting me. It helps me get my brain. I'm looking forward to working the Australian Open for ESPN and also helping Donna. But it starts to get my brain kind of like into being as a commentator again. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for thank you for watching, and keep talking tennis.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.